Hello everybody, and welcome to this webinar on the design and construction of smart cities for a post-COVID world, brought to you by M2M Connectivity and Libelium. M2M is an Australian company with almost 20 years experience designing, integrating and providing the data for industrial IoT systems. Libelium's wireless sensor platform connects the physical and digital worlds. It designs and manufactures technological solutions to make IoT possible. First up, you'll hear from Libelium CEO, Alicia Asín, who will explain how IoT technology can help make cities safer and more efficient post-COVID. Her presentation will be followed by a case study on how EasyWeb Digital deployed public Wi-Fi and smart sensors for the city of Palmerston's Smart City project in Australia's Northern Territory. To close off the webinar, we'll hear from Darryl Chambers, Director of Business Development with M2M Connectivity. M2M has been partnering with Libelium since 2013, and Darryl will explain how the two, working together, can offer solutions that help cities become safer and cleaner and generate new revenue streams. Finally, we'll have a Q&A session with the presenters. So at any time during the presentations, please use the Q&A function in the Zoom toolbar to submit your questions. You can direct them to any of the presenters or leave them as general questions, in which case I'll put them to whoever I think is best placed to answer them. Now it's over to Alicia. She co-founded Libelium in 2002 and has been its CEO ever since. She's focused on IoT as the next tech revolution, starting with smart cities, and is a frequent speaker at international conferences on issues related to smart cities, wireless sensor networks, and IoT. And remember, if you have any questions on Alicia's presentation, please submit them using the Q&A function. Now, over to you, Alicia.
Thanks, Stuart. Good morning, everyone. And I'm so happy, I'm so pleased to be here participating in this webinar. This very special webinar for me, sharing stage virtually with Darryl Chambers from M2M Connectivity, which is one of the longest relationships we have had so far, and it has made that Australia is for us one of the top markets for Libelium. So very, very happy to be here. I want to share with you in the next 15 to 20 minutes the vision that we have at Libelium about smart cities. And let's start by sharing what happened before and after COVID, because we cannot neglect that it's changed everything. So if we look at the IoT big values, before COVID, everyone was talking about connecting things in order to make money, save money, or stay out of jail. Obviously understood as making compliance. But after COVID, we've changed a little bit the focus point for IoT, the benefits that we are demanding from IoT. And number one priority is to stay safe and healthy. So we need to make things healthier again. Return to business activities, and that's been crucial in many countries. How can we ensure that we can open the restaurants, open the shops, and open the cinemas and places that are moving our economics every day? And finally, recover productivity, because when we stop worrying about the COVID, we'll need to face probably a big recession, and we will need to have our businesses totally redefined and being ready for being much more productive. So let's start with the number one point. I want to make parenthesis here, because the COVID hasn't changed only the vision that we have about IoT, but also the vision, the thoughts that we have about privacy. We've seen that suddenly we thought that only technology people were related to privacy conversations in many forums, and now we've seen a boom with all the tracing apps needed to stop the outbreak to spread. And suddenly we were asking to a whole country to start sharing their position, their contact list, the contacts they've been doing. So I think that's a very important point that we have today that we didn't have before. And we could talk only about this topic for the whole webinar, but I will leave it here, and I think it's interesting to maybe catch up later in the Q&A section. So now let's talk about the number one step of how to face safer cities. Well, in our case, in the case of Libelium, we've found that we were offering kind of same products. In some cases, we developed new ones, and I will go now on that, but with a very different approach. So when it comes to new products, the fever screening system was one of the products that we developed in just a couple of weeks. And the idea was, within the notice of the reopening of businesses and most public buildings, how can you go from 100% or a big percentage of the population in lockdown to go back to normal suddenly one day to another? So you need to be ready. And one of the least invasive systems, the least the most respectful ways to check and to separate people ill from people that is healthy, it's to detect the temperature on the skin. You can do this very, very quickly at the entrance of public spaces, and you can quickly have a tier 1 filter to start having to start increasing the security and the safety that you have in that place. Second thing is obviously to monitor, to ensure that you are keeping social distance and limit the amount of people in a place. We used to offer technology and to shopping centers to tell them how many people were they having in a moment, so that they could increase their metrics and check that against their conversion funnels. And now we were using the same technology to totally the opposite. We were expecting to see very, very low occupation figures in the spaces. Remote health monitoring has been to me the big revelation. We've been talking about healthcare and remote healthcare for years, but unfortunately and very sadly, this pandemic has shown us that we don't have enough capacity in our hospitals, and the solution is not making more and more hospitals to face that, but having the balance of having a tier 2 service where you can have the patients home, and you can have them monitor and communicated at all times with the doctors who are in the hospital. And then you have the old activities that you were expecting to find in a smart city before, like air quality and pollution control, all things related to environmental control. Everything related to smart parking and mobility, and of course everything related to monitor the water quality in the city, in places where you are storing drinking water and fresh water, but also in touristic areas, because we saw in Spain, we are very tourism is very important to our economy. We saw that our hotels were being demanded for information this summer that they haven't been demanded before. Like, for example, the people were concerned about not only how many people were staying in the hotel when they were planning their vacation, but also the environmental parameters in the hotel, the air quality and the water quality of the swimming pool, for example, which is something new that this pandemic is bringing us as a side effect. So what's the change that we need to make in our cities to face the post-COVID era? I would say basically the same before COVID era, because we've always needed safer cities for healthier citizens. And I would say that if we are adding something, maybe we should consider about making normality more convenient. What do I mean with this? We've seen in many places that they were using technology to search the information in place. So there's no point in monitoring the amount of people in a park or in a beach or in a mall and giving that information in the place when you are just right there. Because you as a potential user, consumer or citizen would like to know that information ahead, probably before making the decision of whether to go to that beach or to another one, whether is this the right moment to go shopping or you should stay home for a little bit longer and wait for a little bit more. So that's an example of it's not enough putting sensors and controlling all the variables that we have in our hands. It's not enough if we don't make that information accessible to everyone. Mobility, it's one of the biggest topics in cities. In most of the cities, mobility and traffic is always named as ranks in the top 3 problems of the city according to their citizens. And I want to make special mention to what I mean by more transparency for a better democracy, because that's probably the deepest and most important legacy that we can have from smart cities. All this culture of monitor the environmental parameters, monitor water quality, monitor the amount of people in a specific place, monitor anything, kind of install a datocracy culture as well, which is very good because it's a culture where facts and data should lead to political decisions in many cases. And especially in these times where we see the big polarization in the politics in, I think, absolutely all the countries right now. I think that if we are capable to install this culture of taking aside the political ideas and consider deeply and seriously all the data that we have available in our cities, we could make better decisions and understand that many times, when it comes to cities at least, some decisions are just purely technical and not politically. So let's see some examples. This is an example of technology that existed before COVID. That's installed in a park in Zaragoza, the city where I live. And it's used to control the number of people accessing the park and controlling the air quality in the parks to study the relationships between the air quality with children, symptoms of asthma and other illnesses related to the respiratory system. The technology was already installed, and when the COVID started, they start using the same things they were using before to monitor if the number of people in the park was appropriate to be able to comply with the social distancing. And at the same time, they were also monitoring the effect of reducing the traffic in the surroundings, in the quality of the air. Mobility was a very important topic before the pandemic, but now, with more people being afraid of taking the public transport for going to their jobs because they don't feel safe, having systems to divert traffic, to make it more convenient, and to give information about the parking spots are even more important. Why? Because again, it's all about making citizens' life more convenient and easy in a city. So if you are home, it's 8:30 in the morning, and you are thinking about the options you have to commute. You could take the public transport, maybe you could take an electric bike if you are not very far, or you could take your car. If you can know if there is a high level of parking spaces free at the moment, that's safe for you to take your private car, drive and park. If not, you better know this in advance and make other decisions, like just taking the public transport, or maybe delay your entry hour by 30 minutes, for example. Cities will also need to become more efficient because they need to face all the extra expenditures they've been carrying out during the past months. And there's another source of optimization in cities, which is related to the waste collection routes. It's we have in our cities a very old system to drive the same trucks on the same streets every day to unload the same containers, whether they are empty or full. That's not smart at all. Now we have the technology to detect the level of emptiness of those containers, to raise an alert on only those that need to be emptied, and even suggest an optimal route to the truck driver to just pick the right containers and save money, save miles, and save, of course, CO2 emissions in the atmosphere. When we talk about cities, we cannot neglect construction. Construction is one of the most important parts in a city. We are surrounded by all kinds of buildings. So what can we do? What can the IoT do for this sector in these moments? Well, again, we have to keep in mind always sustainability. And for example, this is a project of a big construction company in Spain that were having construction works for building a highway in the north of Spain, and they wanted to be responsible with the environment and being very sustainable. So they were measuring all the impact on the water treatment plant they were making. They were monitoring before they started and during all the works. They were putting in place some environmental measures to avoid polluting the water. And this project was about tracking and monitoring the efficiency of those measurements. And we could become more creative because we've seen one of the funniest stories we've seen in Spain is that most of people live in small flats. And after the lockdown, some real estate websites were saying that for the first time, everyone was changing their behavior when looking for a house. They were having questions about efficiency in the houses, and about extra services in the urban residentials that they just hadn't before. And that was because after being so many days in the lockdown, just you in your house, we've changed the perception that we have, the appreciation of value that we have from our houses. And for the first time, we think that, well, energy efficient might be very, very critical when deciding to buy one house. But also, what about having extra information from the sensors that we have in a house? What else can we know from the environment? Can we use the technology to make even new revenue streams from our garage, for example? Can we use technology to rent the parking spots that we have in our garage to have an extra income for the community and reduce the community cost? That's food for creativity to reshape and to redefine an old sector like construction. And I will finish just with the final conclusion that it's IoT hasn't changed its purpose with or without COVID. We are just seeing a technology capable to improve competitiveness, digitization, and increase productivity, and of course, in a framework of sustainability. COVID hasn't changed that purpose, it's only accelerating it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alicia. Next up, we'll hear from Daniel Sachero, who's the business manager at EasyWeb Digital, a company that designs, builds and manages systems for smart communities. Daniel will tell us how EasyWeb helped the city of Palmerston in Australia's Northern Territory expand its public Wi-Fi network, and he'll talk about some of the benefits that network has brought. And again, remember, please submit any questions for Daniel using the Q&A function. So Daniel, over to you.
Well, thank you, Stuart, and thank you, Alicia, and also the people from M2M for inviting me this morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is, as Stuart said before, Daniel Sachero, and I am from EasyWeb Digital. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we work and live. For me, in Melbourne, is the Wurundjeri tribe of the Kulin Nation. At EasyWeb, we recognize their continuing connection to the land, water and community, and we pay our respects to all elders, past, present, and future. So thank you again. Today, I will share a story about a smart city project that we were involved in the Northern Territory with the Palmerston City Council. There were two important objectives of this project. The first one was connecting people to the internet. The second one, which is the focus of this seminar, was collecting urban environmental and local weather data to assist the council in making better operational and compliance decisions. So first, let's start talking about the city of Palmerston in the Northern Territory. The city of Palmerston is, in population terms, the second largest local government area in the Northern Territory. It has a population of about 40,000 people and growing significantly. And as people can see in that sign, there are some very dangerous characters using in its urban parks, including some quite big, salty crocodiles. I took that photo when I was doing a site survey for this project. So in 2018, early 2018, the city was awarded a grant from the federal government. So next, I like to talk about the project timeline of that smart city grant. So early 2018, federal government awards City of Palmerston with a smart city grant. By mid 2018, the council had gone to tender to deliver the first part, which was the public Wi-Fi. We were selected by the council around 2018 and started to deploy public Wi-Fi around key areas of the city. In mid 2019, the council went to tender again to deliver the second part of the project, which was the delivery of smart sensors for the city. In late 2019, we were awarded the tender for this project and started early in 2020, and we completed the project by July 2020. So this photo here is a bushfire in the Northern Territory. I took this photo on the way to Kakadu National Park. And this is a very common sight during the dry season, when the bush gets burned off as part of the cultural fire management. So these huge bushfires drive a significant increase in air pollution in the north over very large areas. Measuring air pollution in the city of Palmerston became one of the key drivers of this smart city project. There were other drivers as well. So measuring air quality or air pollution was one of the key drivers, but there were other important requirements of this project. The first one was to measure urban noise levels and also look at the local park weather and to provide that information in advance so people could make decisions about going or not going to the park. During days where temperature or humidity was very high. Another key requirement was all the data collected by the sensors as part of the project had to be fully integrated into a smart city application. So what was our solution? Our solution was based around the Libelium plug and sense technology. Because of the type of data we had to collect, we used both smart city and smart agriculture sensors. We had to use both mains to 40 AC and solar powered sensors based on the locations and what we were and the requirement. For internet connectivity, we looked at LoRaWAN. We looked at deploying a LoRaWAN network across Palmerston. However, the numbers didn't really quite stack up, mainly because of the low number of sensors. So we decided to go with a 4G connection. When we started the project, we were using Eagle.io as a smart city platform. But in the middle of the project, the council they selected a different application. So we had to migrate all the data that was being collected in one application to a different, to the Urban Institute Smart City application. Finally, the last component of our solution to the council was a comprehensive ongoing sensor maintenance service. So what were the I guess the key challenges that we had? One critical challenge was matching up the sensor power requirements or the power needs to what it was available on site. Some of the sensors, especially the noise level sensors, require 240 AC. Other sensors could be totally powered with solar power requirements. So that was a critical part of our project when we were installing and deploying sensors. Another one is to ensure that before you roll out the sensor on site, that you clearly define and understand what data you are collecting, and also you test the collection before deployment. Very, very important. We deployed the sensors first, and then the council changed the smart city application. So we had to go on site and reprogram all the sensors again. That photograph that is shown there is actually when we were upgrading the firmware on the devices to connect to the new smart city application. That has a significant cost. The last one, which I think is important, is to ensure that and keep in mind that sensors are delicate instruments. They have a limited life depending on the sensors. So you need to ensure that you have a very comprehensive maintenance program to keep on replacing and keeping those sensors reliable and accurate. So where are we with the project? Well, we are collecting data. All the sensors have been installed by July, by the end of July. So we are collecting data, accurate and reliable data, but with that, it comes the realization that data collection is only a very basic building block of a smart city strategy. So what is important, like Alicia pointed out before, is what do you do with the data? How you can use it? How you can use it to assist you in making better decisions for the citizens. So that's, I think, is the stage where the council is at the moment, looking at the data collection and considering what they can do and how they can better serve the residents. So thank you, everyone, for this.
Thank you, Daniel. We'll now hear from Daryl Chambers, Director of Business Development with M2M Connectivity. Daryl co-founded the company in 2002, and it was acquired by Sierra Wireless in January 2020, and he remains a director of the business. He'll explain how IoT can be used to develop safer, cleaner cities and generate new revenue streams for your city. And once again, please don't forget to use the Q&A function to submit any questions to Daryl. So Daryl, over to you.
Thank you, Stuart. Thank you, Daniel, for that case study on rolling out and managing a smart city environmental monitoring project in Palmerston. Found that really interesting insight into many of the issues faced with smart city rollouts, how Libelium can help, but also how councils need to understand what their requirements are as part of this process. And a special thanks to Alicia too for a great presentation on trends in smart cities from Libelium's global perspective and how COVID is really changing the IoT needs for these cities. M2M has partnered with Libelium since 2013, so we've been a partner for a long time, and we continue to expand our business with them. Just this week, we have RCM approved a new range of plug and sense modems from Libelium supporting LTE, Cat M1 and NB-IoT. So these can now be sold in Australia. And that gives us a product range with far greater coverage over cellular networks than we've ever had before. And we expect to see many more opportunities for Libelium sensors in the market. We love working with Libelium. It gives us a broad range of integrated sensors, increasingly with high-end accuracy, that work across many RF systems, including those that we typically focus on, being LTE, Cat M1, LoRaWAN, Sigfox, Wi-Fi, but the list goes on. Further, Libelium has key strengths in its core IoT target markets, including smart cities, smart water, agriculture and environment. And this is where we really see Libelium come to the fore. M2M has an expert engineering and support team in Australia to work with local customers of Libelium. We provide consulting at an early stage to qualify in opportunities and confirm suitability of both the sensors and the technologies for communications before customers commit to any spend. We can then offer a range of services, including solution design, so we can work with a customer, be it a council or an integrator, to work on the best way to roll out the systems. We can also look at the types of technology to use, be it LoRaWAN or cellular or whatever. We can also help develop specific code for an opportunity. And in reality, most opportunities are unique and need some code development. We offer around-the-box services, so we often will set up the systems in our workshop before shipping them out to the customer, and that allows for much easier on-site plug-and-play installation. And where required, we also offer things like the SIM cards for the IoT, 4G and LTE products, but also managed services, so we can keep an eye on systems as they operate in the field and identify any issues quickly and before they become critical. Lastly, we develop code to integrate the data from these sensors into your preferred platforms. So we're working with all the big players, Azure, AWS, S3, but also many other local Australian IoT platforms such as Raven, LiveSense and Eagle.io. They're just examples. We work with many, many IoT platforms. So what I'd like to say now is if you have an opportunity where you think Libelium might suit, then contact your local M2M account manager and we would love to start a discussion with you about your needs. And in that process, we'll bring in our engineering experts and we'll sit with you and work out how these products can be used to the most advantage. And as we learned from the previous speakers, that's an important thing. And in a post-COVID world, it's even more important to get these things right. I'd like to hand back now to Stuart. I'm sure there'll be many questions on the presentations we've just heard. And thank you once again to all our speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Darryl. Yes, we've certainly got some questions for some of the presenters. So first off, this is a question for Alicia. Alicia, what kind of radio waves do your applications use? Are they Bluetooth, ultra-wideband, or what?
Well, we think that we are covering a number of them. We integrate in our devices cellular modems, Zigbee modems as well, LoRaWAN, Sigfox, and we will keep on adding new relevant technologies to our platform. I think the key thing is that the IoT is a very fragmented market, technologically speaking, and it's key to ensure that you have a platform that can integrate the communication protocols of today and also the ones that may be tomorrow.
Okay, thanks, Alicia. The next question's for Daniel. Daniel, was the move from Eagle.io to UI driven by the council?
Well, good morning, Derek. Thank you for the question. The quick answer is yes. It was driven by the council. However, like everything else in projects of this nature, things are not quite linear as they look. But when there was a bit of timing, the tender for the devices, for the smart devices, came out before the tender for the smart city application. So what we were providing was always a short to medium term transition for them to select a new smart city application through a tender process, and then we had to integrate with whoever they chose. So while we were delivering and putting the first sensors on the ground, the evaluation for the smart city project was still going. That evaluation, they had a number of different people, and eventually they selected UI. Okay. So we had to, once that decision was made, we had to integrate the Libelium sensors back to the UI interface, and that required firmware changes and other bits. But yes, totally council driven for that decision.
Right. And I think this is probably aimed at you, Daniel, but they haven't said. Are your devices ruggedized and capable of supporting operating the harsh Australian environment? And also, are they AC and DC capable? And if anyone else likes to comment on the devices they use and their ruggedization, that's please go ahead after Daniel.
Well, it doesn't get much more rugged and tough than the Northern Territory in Australia, I think, in terms of high temperature, cyclonic winds, high humidity, variances of temperature, like, you know, during the dry is 35 degrees and very dry. During the wet is 40 degrees and very wet. And we have very high winds. So the devices are very, very rugged. We also have done tests in Launceston in Tasmania in the middle of winter and using Libelium devices. And that's exactly the opposite. It's very cold and wet. So yes, that they are very rugged devices. In terms if they are AC or DC capable, it really depends on the sensor that you are deploying. For example, some sensors, in particular the noise sensor, does require quite a lot of power, so you need to connect that to AC. Other sensors could be connected directly to solar powered devices.
Thanks, Daniel. Alicia, Daryl, do you have any comments on sensors?
Oh, I think Daniel's answered that really well. I don't think we could get a better view of the robustness of the products than Daniel just described. So I'll leave that. Thank you, Daniel.
Okay, okay, well, a question now for you, Alicia. You mentioned a really interesting topic, data democratization. What's Libelium's point of view on this topic? How do you see this moving forward as there are more things and people starting to be connected to the internet?
That's an interesting topic indeed. I think that when it comes to smart cities data, there should be a general position to make all the data produced in a city open data available to make more, first of all, to be polled and accessed by citizens whenever they want. And secondly, via being available to be treated and why not monetize by third parties and create and use the data generated by the city to create new services and applications. We've seen some interesting case studies in Nordic cities where they've matched the deployment of an air quality environmental network with new uses of new ways of communicating between the city and the citizens. So instead of saying, I am the mayor, we have an air quality problem downtown, so I will put this street only for pedestrians, or I will put a congestion toll. Instead of that, instead of only doing that, let's say, hey, there's a problem here. We have these pollution levels in this part of the city. We thought that this could be the best way to address this problem, and you, citizens, will be able to monitor the progress because you will be able to access the data. So I think that's perfect, and that's a very good example on how to use IoT to drive a better communication, a new way to government in the cities, and to the idea I was talking before about better democracy.
Stuart, can't hear you.
And there's another question coming for you, Alicia. Does Libelium have a satellite solution that contains a direct pass-through for RS-232 or 485? Fairly specific technical question there.
No, we don't have a satellite solution yet. That's one of the protocols we haven't integrated yet.
Okay. This is probably one for you, Daryl. Does the new Cat-M1 NB1 product work on the Australian network providers, and what experiences have people had with that?
Thanks, Stuart. Yes, absolutely. The product is working across all the Australian network providers. So Cat-M1 is mainly a Telstra network. NB-IoT is run by all three main cellular operators in Australia. The experience, NB-IoT is not IP over cellular. So it is a more complex communications to work with initially. So we do a lot of work with customers getting the NB-IoT system to work the way the customer needs it to work, given they've probably come from an IP connectivity solution. It's not that it's really difficult, but you do have to be careful about how much data you send over those networks, or you'll start to have other issues. So it's really important to set up and configure and run those products over NB-IoT carefully. And for us, that means, you know, a fair amount of care in the design process before you launch. But yeah, the products will work across all the networks.
Thanks, Daryl. Next question's for you, Alicia. Taking your comments on backhaul technologies further, can you elaborate on the trends you see in the market across Sigfox, LoRa, Cat-M1, NB-IoT? How is the relative proportion of these technologies changing as mobile network operators enable the cellular networks, which has really only happened in the past few years? And what's your estimate of backhaul proportions in 2022? Nice easy question for you there.
Well, I think it's a very good one as well. And the short answer is that it is way more fragmented than we could expect. Last year, we made a survey about the preferred protocols used in IoT applications. And first of all, bear in mind that connectivity is not attached, specific connectivity is not attached to IoT in general. It's all about the business case, but also about the landscape, because we have had projects related to fish farms, for example, using 4G in some cases, LoRaWAN or Sigfox, Wi-Fi, if that was available. And even we have a very recent research case study to be published about 5G as well in Scotland. So it's if you are curious, I would invite you to download the report, which is in our website, about the barriers and trends in IoT. And the results I remember were that Wi-Fi and cellular were still top of the communication protocols preferred in most of the use cases, and they were accounting for I remember, just talking by memory, I think 30%. The rest was very, very fragmented. Just one comment from comparing Sigfox against LoRa, and it's that we do see a very verticalization here, and whereas Sigfox is being used in most consumer IoT devices, and also it's working very well in asset tracking applications. We are seeing LoRaWAN most preferred for other use cases such as smart agriculture, farming, water treatment, places where people need to deploy their network, because at this stage of the market, understanding the total cost of ownership is easier for customers in a LoRaWAN scenario.
Mm.
It's a complicated question.
Yes.
I haven't made it perfect, but
It certainly is. I mean, there's so many different wireless technologies available for IoT. It must be quite hard for people to choose the right one. And this is another question for you, Alicia. Is Libelium working on edge computing, given that 5G is becoming more accessible? Is the base hardware going to change from Atmega? I have no idea what that means, but I'm sure you do.
Yeah. Yes, we will enter in edge computing, and we are already researching and working on products that will come to the light on 2021 that will perform for the first time some artificial intelligence algorithms on the edge to increase the performance of the sensors, to increase the accuracy received by the sensors, to make it to make it more accurate. And yes, in that case, we are not using the 8 mega microcontrollers. So soon we will get more information on that.
Okay, thank you, Alicia. And there's another question which I think for Darryl, which I think some people have, which Alicia has partially answered. I see a lot of arguments on the merits of different wireless technologies for IoT. What are your thoughts? Which ones should people use?
Well, I'm not going to dig a hole here, Stuart. So, look, we would, our method of working with a customer is to sit down and understand what the customer's requirements are first, and then to look at available technologies and see what fits best. So sometimes it's really, or in fact, most times it's really clear about a technology is going to be the best fit. So if we're working with a council that's already spent a lot of money building a LoRaWAN network, I'm unlikely to go and say, I think you need to use Sigfox or Wi-Fi or something. But equally, if we've got a project that wants to monitor remote water locations and we've got NB-IoT coverage and nothing else, and it's only a few sites, I'm highly likely to sit there and say, I think NB-IoT is the right technology. But we will listen in each case and try and work our way through what's the best mix of hardware, sensors and technology to get the solution to work. I'll just add one more thing. We kind of learnt this in our satellite business, where we work with all the main M2M IoT satellite operators, and potentially we could be competing between them all and playing off each other. The reality is that in most cases, and I'd say 99% of cases where we work, one technology fits, the others aren't as good. And so it really sort of draws in a proper discussion with the customer. You can really get to the right technology and the right solution. So there's no favourite.
Okay, thank you. And Alicia, I've got a question for you. When you're talking about post-COVID plans by cities, where do you think most of them are at? Are they still reacting to COVID, or are they now making long-term plans for a post-COVID world where most people seem to recognise that the world isn't going to go back to what it was pre-COVID? The world is going to be different for the foreseeable future. Have people got to that stage yet, or are they still kind of in knee-jerk reaction mode?
Well, I guess that most cities are still just fighting the immediate problems of COVID, but you see some signals of thinking of the future. So, for example, the European Union, for example, is making a Green Deal. It's the recovery plan for the EU is just. It's just digitalization, sustainability, and IoT. It's all about those three pillars. And we were talking about, just right before the outbreak, if you remember, we were talking about climate change all day. And suddenly it's like, it's not anymore happening, but it is. And especially there are more research demonstrating that the role of climate change in this pandemic, because we are destroying habitats for animals and making them move to urban areas where they shouldn't be. And for the first time, we are being in contact with animals we shouldn't be in contact if they could be in their habitats. So there's a direct relationship, even between the pandemic and the climate change again. So I think that this is making react everyone about this being more sustainable in our cities.
Thanks, Alicia. It's funny you talk about animals where they shouldn't be. There were two deer seen walking down the street near me the other day, and no one actually knows where they came from, but there they were, deers with antlers walking down the street. Well, that's all we have time for. Thanks everybody for your questions, and thanks to all our presenters. Now, in the next 48 hours, we'll send you a link to a recording of the webinar, and then there'll be another link to a transcript of all the Q&As. So thanks again, everybody, for attending, and thanks again to all our presenters. And we now close the webinar. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.